You probably already know that this series has a few problems. In fact, it's currently the lowest rated series of all time, which honestly is kind of impressive considering the amount of slop that we've received over the last couple years. And it's also a rare day when critics and viewers actually agree on something, but I suppose just like with a broken clock, critics are bound to be right once in a while. Therefore, it should come as no surprise that this series has received a tremendous amount of backlash, and not just because it's terrible or because of the blatant racist blackwashing. There's something even worse about it, and that's how the series itself is being presented. It would be one thing if the series was presented as a fictional drama that just happens to include people from history, because often fictional historical dramas will play fast and loose with portrayals of historical people and events. But that is not the case here. The creators of this series are genuinely attempting to present this series as a legitimate documentary that contains historical fact. They want this series to be treated and received as if it contains valid and accurate information about Cleopatra and the events surrounding her, despite the fact that nearly everything being presented in this series is objectively, verifiably wrong. While they did manage to get some details correct, they are few and far between. Cleopatra is one of the most well-known and well-documented people from ancient history. There is a tremendous amount of information from a wide variety of sources, and all of it utterly refutes nearly everything being presented in this so-called documentary. Therefore, the biggest problem isn't just that the series is bad, because heaven knows there's plenty of other bad content out there. The problem is that the people involved in this series are making a concerted and deliberate attempt to rewrite history in order to fit their own extraordinarily racist narrative. Queen Cleopatra is bad. The opening starts out with some narration from the person primarily responsible for this dumpster fire, namely Jada Pinkett Smith, and essentially what she's saying boils down to a bunch of man-hating nonsense, which seems to be pretty par for the course for her if you happen to know anything about her marriage.
I said, God damn!
As mentioned, this series is attempting to present itself as a legitimate documentary, so there will be scenes of reenactment interwoven with interviews of academics and other experts, really big fucking air quotes right there, who ironically have absolutely no fucking clue what they're talking about. The first one of these morons is a professor who quickly reminds me that some of the dumbest people that I've ever met in my entire life insist on being referred to with the title of professor.
I don't care what they tell you in school. Cleopatra was black.
Real quick, just go fuck yourself.
And here is where we are first presented with the principal lie of the entire series, namely that Cleopatra was black.
What? No.
This is, of course, objectively and verifiably false. Cleopatra was Greek. Specifically, she came from a Macedonian bloodline. There are numerous statues and portraits of Cleopatra that survive even to this day, and every single one of them depict her looking something similar to this. In absolutely no way, shape, form, or fashion could she ever possibly be construed as being black, nor could she ever be considered African. In fact, she wasn't even Egyptian in ethnicity. She was Greek from Macedonia. She was white. End of story.
Yeah, I am black.
Unfortunately, the creators of this series are doing something that has become more and more common in recent years, where a group of racist black people attempt to essentially steal the history and the legacy of important people and cultures throughout the world and throughout history. And it's not just with Cleopatra either. Some of these groups have made claims that other people from history, like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Socrates, and even Genghis Khan, were all black people who originally came from Africa and simply moved around the world.
Things just get even more silly, to the point where it's hard to tell if this is all a joke or not.
During my Quantumania review, I kept referring to Kang as we was Kangs, and a few people got butthurt about it, but they don't understand where the name came from and why I was using it. and it's linked to all of these extremely racist black groups that are trying to essentially steal history and steal the legacy of ancient cultures. They believe, sincerely, genuinely believe, that black people built the Egyptian Empire, black people built the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, and even some of the South American empires. They believe that they were built by black people from Africans who had traveled over across the ocean before anybody else. It is absurd. It is insanity. So there was a joke and a meme that got associated with these incredibly bizarre, absurd, racist black groups, and they were called We Was Kangs because they were trying to essentially steal all of the legacies and the culture from these different groups. And for my Quantum Mania video, it kind of fits twice. One, there's a whole bunch of them, so there's more than one Kang, so it's We Was Kangs. But at the same time, they also racistly blackwash the character of Kang, which goes hand in hand with what these groups are doing, where they're stealing ancient cultures and trying to proclaim them as black. What Disney and Marvel did was they took the white character of Kang and they racistly blackwashed him, so it kind of fit on double levels. But that's where the We Was Kangs joke and meme comes from. It's from these groups that genuinely, sincerely believe that Genghis Khan and Socrates and Alexander the Great, they believe that they were all black. That's how crazy these people are.
I can't wait to see what next preposterous thing you're going to try.
This behavior is quite obviously an extremely racist thing to do. It's also immoral, unethical, and most importantly, it's anti-historical. The very notion that these things could be true is absurd, almost to the point of parody. What's even more ridiculous about this is that as we're being introduced to the actress who's playing Cleopatra, we get a narrator telling us that she comes from a family that originates from Macedonia. So how did the show creators reconcile the fact that they want to depict Cleopatra as being black, but at the same time that she is also from a family of Greek Macedonians? Well, they do this by implying that all of the Macedonians, like Alexander the Great, for example, were also black.
What?
Also, you know what? For the rest of this video, I am not going to refer to this fucking idiot right here as Cleopatra, because this is not Cleopatra. So I need to come up with a new name. I'm thinking maybe Black Cleo. That doesn't sound too good. Shanae. I used to watch a lot of Martin Lawrence when I was younger, but I don't know. Shanae doesn't quite work. Perhaps we need something a little more authentic. I got it. We'll call this character Cliniqua.
That's a good idea. I like that.
So from here forward, if I use the name Cleopatra, I'm referring to the real historic person, and if I use Cliniqua, I'm referring to whatever stupid version this show has come up with. During this first reenactment, someone else bursts into the room and tells Cliniqua that it's time. We're then told by the narrators that in order for Cliniqua to rule, her parents must be dead, which for some reason, the experts in the documentary try to make it sound like this is an incredibly unique thing, even though it's pretty much par for the course with any kind of monarchy throughout the entire world. Remember, these experts giving us this narration are a bunch of college professors and scholars who are trying to elevate themselves and make themselves sound far more intelligent than they actually are. And to do this, they're telling us things that are basically common knowledge, but they're acting as if it's some sort of incredible revelation.
That sounds extremely egotistical and cringe.
Regardless, Cliniqua goes to see her father and she finds him dying on his bed. Also, the room happens to be completely full of black people, which I should point out is historically inaccurate to say the least. Now, I'm not ever going to claim to be an expert on the topic of Cleopatra or Egypt, so I won't be able to point out every single historical inaccuracy in this series, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that if you go into this documentary assuming that everything they say is wrong, you're going to be in a much better position than if you assume anything that they say is actually correct. I mean, sure, they do get a couple of the things right, like the dates of a certain event here or there, and they did manage to actually have everything occur in Egypt instead of, on the moon or something like that, so they managed to get at least a few of the details correct. But even then, again, assume pretty much everything is going to be wrong and you'll be in a better position.
Why your pretentious, poorly written, high-budget friends back there can eat a double-decker shit sandwich.
Also, I feel it bears mentioning that the acting in this series is terrible. Much, much worse than what you have on Star Wars or MCU on Disney Plus and the CW and stuff like that. This is a new level of bad. I have seen after-school specials that had better acting than this show. So then, just before her father dies, Cliniqua tells him that our legacy is safe with me. Yeah, I somehow doubt that.
Good attitude. You are still an absolute scumbag, though.
As Cliniqua is leaving the room, one of her brother's advisors approaches her and says that he'll take care of everything, which to me sounds like he's volunteering to handle all of the burial arrangements so that the family doesn't have to worry about that sort of stuff. But Cliniqua, being the fucking idiot that she is, has the first girl boss moment of the show. Cliniqua stares at him and then says, "We're going to be doing things differently now." And then she storms out of the room. Which sounds really weird and out of place, almost like this dialogue was written by, I don't know, an abusive wife.
He's testing even my limits.
Also, I think it's fairly important to mention that this advisor guy appears to be the only white person in the room, and already he's being treated like a villain. I'm sure that is just a coincidence, though, and it has nothing at all to do with the extremely racist views of the show creators. Later on, there's a ceremony that's a combination of a wedding and a coronation. The black guy who is pretending to be Cliniqua's father put into his will that both Cliniqua and her brother were meant to rule together. The professors in this documentary say that this happens because the Egyptian gods would marry brother and sister, and therefore it made sense for the Egyptian rulers to marry brother and sister to emulate the gods. Except this is wrong, or at least it's mostly wrong. Yeah, that might have been a small reason, but the primary reason why this sort of thing would happen in royal families is because those royal families wanted to keep their bloodlines as pure as possible. It wasn't just an Egyptian thing. Once more, this is something that happens with monarchies throughout the entire world. I don't understand how the experts and the scholars in this series could be so fucking dumb. They're acting as if all of these things like succession, how the princes and princesses can't become rulers until their parents are dead. Yeah, no duh. And about how the royal families intermarried so that they would keep the bloodlines pure. Yes, this is something that happened throughout the entire world, and yet the experts on this series think that all of this is unique to Egypt. I don't fucking understand why.
But I had no idea they were this stupid.
During the celebration scene, Cliniqua takes a crown and places it on her brother, now husband's head. But when she presents her own crown to him to place on her head, he refuses, looking down on her and shaking his head. Therefore, we are subjected to a strong woman moment where Cliniqua defiantly takes up the crown and places it on her own head.
Yes. Queen what?
The not-so-hidden meaning behind this scene couldn't be more transparent because the show creators are morons, and they believe that all men are bad, and Cliniqua is a strong woman, and she can do everything for herself. It's fucking absurd. But don't worry, it gets worse. Sometime after being crowned, Cliniqua goes to visit some of the other cities under her control within Egypt, and almost every single person in those cities is black.
When a film casts a black actor in a white role, any criticism of the film is racist.
Which is not even remotely close to being historically accurate. Yes, there was some small number of black people in this northern part of Africa. However, fun fact, most of them were slave traders. To be clear here, they weren't slaves themselves, they were slave traders. You know, the ones selling the slaves.
Fucking terrible.
But now we arrive at the part of the episode where the so-called experts spend the next several minutes blatantly lying. We are told by these morons that no one knows the exact bloodline and lineage of Cleopatra. This is a lie. We absolutely do know the lineage of Cleopatra, and it was Greek Macedonian. We're then told that Egypt was a very diverse place, and that Egyptians at the time could have been just as dark as someone you might find in the heart of the African Congo.
There is no compelling evidence for any of the claims they are now making.
This is a lie. As mentioned, there were some people in this area with very dark skin, but they were not Egyptians. They were mostly slave traders who were passing through. We are told that the traditional view of Cleopatra as a white person from Europe is wrong, because she viewed herself as an Egyptian, and therefore she could have had any kind of skin color.
Well, I definitely am not white.
This is a lie. It's also really fucking dumb. Cleopatra, as stated, was a Macedonian Greek. She was white. You can't change the color of your skin just because you identify with a particular geographical region. That's not how it works.
I imagine her to have curly hair like me and a similar skin color.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Moving forward, we're then told that there's a civil war in Rome between Julius Caesar and Pompey, which is surprisingly one of the only accurate things in this entire documentary. And unsurprisingly, both of them are white people, and both of them are portrayed as being evil. If you recall, I previously mentioned groups like the racist morons who created this documentary will often depict other historical figures as being black as a way of kind of stealing the legacy from those people. But obviously this series didn't do that because they need to prop up Julius Caesar as being a villain, and that's why they're making him white. All of these racist moron groups can't even agree on what they want to steal. Regardless, continuing forward, we're then told that there's an attempt on Cliniqua's life by her brother's advisors, which forces Cliniqua to flee. I can't help but notice that in all of these scenes, there are no bodyguards near Cliniqua at all. She wanders out by herself into the city or into large groups of people, and she never has any kind of protection around her. I guess the series just couldn't afford to pay off a couple of extras to wear some armor to pretend to be Cliniqua's bodyguards, I guess? But don't worry, it gets worse. While in exile, Cliniqua puts together an army in order to retake the throne from her brother. However, the documentary wants us to believe that Cliniqua played a major part in actually training the soldiers themselves.
You serious?
We're shown that Cliniqua is such an amazing warrior that she's able to easily defeat most men in one-on-one combat, which I'm sure comes as no surprise to most of you that this is a complete fucking lie.
It's not your fault, you chronic two-faced liars.
The reality is that Cleopatra was not a warrior of any kind and likely had no understanding of combat beyond the basics. Cleopatra was widely respected and considered desirable by powerful men because she was very intelligent and well-read and could keep up with them in most any conversation. She understood politics and could talk about a great many topics, but she absolutely was not a warrior at all. However, the series somehow gets even dumber because the following scene shows that Cliniqua was not only a powerful warrior, but she was also a brilliant general, which again is a fucking lie. Yes, she was very intelligent, but she had generals that would plan out the battle strategies and the tactics for her.
Obi, when it fits a woman.
During all this, Pompey is losing his war and flees to Egypt. Cliniqua's brother and his advisors capture and kill Pompey, which angers Julius Caesar. Cliniqua sees this as an opportunity to retake her throne and to get into the good graces of Julius Caesar and Rome. We're then told a story about how Cliniqua managed to smuggle herself into Julius Caesar's room by being wrapped in a carpet. The professors in this documentary say that it most likely didn't happen that way, but then this dumb bitch right here says one of the most blindingly ironic things in the entire series. She then claims that the person responsible for this story happened 150 years after Cleopatra, and then she smugly proclaims that the guy telling the story, well, he didn't really know the truth.
This is some kind of joke, right?
Given the amount of unbelievable stupidity on display in this series, it is simply breathtaking that this woman would actually accuse another person about not knowing the truth about Cleopatra.
Do you see the irony?
But it gets even dumber because then this other idiot says that the story was intended to portray Cleopatra as a lowly temptress and to insult her in order to sway the people of Rome away from Cleopatra. But the first one said that it wasn't real and it didn't actually happen, and now this one is saying that it did happen, but that it was fake and it was meant to be an insult. So you have this contradiction between these two so-called experts, and the series never even addresses this. They just kind of gloss over it and they say, yep, both of these experts completely disagree, but we don't address it, we don't bring it up, we don't mention it. Just, keep going, I guess, whatever. And it continues to get dumber, because then the second idiot claims the real reason that people were attracted to Cleopatra wasn't because of her intelligence or her cunning or anything, it was because she was an incredibly beautiful woman. Which again, I need to point out, is a fucking lie. Cleopatra was not ugly, but she certainly wasn't beautiful either. As mentioned, she was desirable for her intelligence and cunning.
Because I want you to respect me for my mind. See how dumb that sounds, girl?
Honestly, I think it's kind of funny because what we have in this situation is a reversal from what we would usually get with these nutjob feminists, because normally they would say that appearance doesn't matter at all and you should admire the woman for her intelligence and ability, which is exactly the opposite of what they're doing to Cleopatra, because in the real world, Cleopatra was admired for her intelligence, but these morons want to make it out that Cliniqua was admired just because she was beautiful. Continuing forward, Julius Caesar reinstates Cliniqua to the throne of Egypt alongside her brother, but her brother gets angry and begins an Egyptian civil war. And we're told that there's this big war, except the series only shows us a couple of scenes, and it's not actually Egyptians fighting Egyptians. Instead, all of these reenactment scenes of the Egyptian civil war just show a bunch of white Roman soldiers attacking and killing helpless black, quote-unquote, Egyptian people.
You don't approve? Well, too bad.
The juxtaposition of what we're being told versus what is happening on screen is kind of bizarre, to say the least, but, you know, also makes it more obvious that the show creators are pretty fucking racist. This is pretty much where the first episode ends, and there are 3 more episodes in the series, but I honestly don't think that I could watch them and make videos while keeping my sanity intact. So this is going to be the only video that I make on this series. There are a lot of problems with this documentary: the terrible acting, the racist blackwashing, the rewriting of history, the stealing of legacies. But if I had to choose what I thought was the absolute worst possible thing about this so-called documentary, wouldn't be all of the bullshit that is contained within it, but rather that there are actually people dumb enough to believe it.
Taking shots at the enemy, I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything. I pop off with the new rock, electronic